Was The Lord of the Rings written as an allegory? Tolkien, of course, as we've already indicated, said absolutely not. And you'll notice the language here. Tolkien had a cordial dislike of allegory. That's putting it mildly. He couldn't stand allegory. And so what does he describe Lord of the Rings as? Look at the language here. Fundamentally religious and Catholic work, but the religious element is absorbed into the story and symbolism. This is interesting what Tolkien's self-conception was of Lord of the Rings. He did not see it as an allegory. He was not trying to write a life of Christ. He was not trying to mimic the Christian storyline. But he does say it is inherently religious, and it's Christian. But the Christian imagery, the Christian concepts are absorbed into the story I've written, and so you sort of get it sort of indirectly. And I think you'll bear that out. One of the things we'll discover in a couple weeks when we start doing redemption is it's really a lot more direct to find the Christ figure in Narnia, right? I mean, who's the Christ figure in Narnia? Well, Aslan, right? If you miss that, then this may not be the class for you. In Lord of the Rings, people say, well, what's the Christ figure? Well, I mean, on one level you could well, it's obviously Gandalf. I mean, he dies and comes back to life, right? And then you're like, well, wait a second. It's obviously Aragorn. I mean, he's the king, returned. And then you're like, well, wait a second. It's obviously Frodo, right? He bears the burden and suffers and gives his life effectively. And then, of course, most people who've examined Lord of the Rings say, well, actually, all of those guys are Christ figures at some level. And we'll actually unpack that in a later class. 2 classes from now, I'll talk about the sort of threefold office of Christ in Lord of the Rings and how that plays out, because I think it's there, and I think it's there in these different characters. And you can see that Tolkien is really right. It isn't an allegory, but yet can you not see Christian stuff in there? And can you not feel the Christian worldview in there? So it's there, but it's there indirectly. It's there sort of in a backdoor way. Now, of course, this gets right to the point of what makes fantasy so effective, right? Fantasy writing, fictional fantasy writing is so effective if it's done Christianly because it can get you into Christian thinking without you knowing you're getting into Christian thinking. And it's sort of like a gateway into the Christian worldview. And so what's fascinating to me, and this may be a marvel to you too, is the way that non-Christians love Lord of the Rings. And that non-Christians love Narnia. And I'm thinking to myself, why? Is it just that you wish it were true? What about that resonates with you, but yet when you read the Bible, that doesn't resonate with you? Like, what about Lord of the Rings you find satisfying, but when you hear the story of redemption in Christ, you don't? And I always find that interesting. And I think that's exactly how Lewis ended up being converted, by the way. Is that Lewis ended up being converted because he realized the beauty of a mythological story with that kind of ending. And Tolkien basically said to him, well, you know, that's Christianity. It's the true myth. And it ended up, sort of the lights went on. He's like, oh, wait, so it's the myth that really happened? I mean, all the things I love about the mythology stories, I mean, there's a version of that that's true. If that's the case, then I want to be a part of that. And that's exactly what led, of course, to his conversion.